First of all, I wanted to offer our condolences, Tim, hearing about the
Oh,
loss of your brother, my friend, and your brother Kurt, and we're all thinking about you. And I know it's
thank
a
you,
rough
man.
time for everyone. And then this happens. My gosh, what a crazy time, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. He was it's tough to any time to have that kind of loss in your family, but 12 years your junior as a sibling is, and with the mileage between us, Hong Kong to here, that makes it even more difficult to deal with. And I'm still in the processing stage, in a lot of ways, but I know he's in a better place and certainly out of pain. So that's a good thing.
Well, absolutely, and we appreciate you doing this with us. We're
Sure.
just it's just such a crazy time. We're like sitting here, and obviously we're all so used to we would have just got done. We would have crowned a national champion in basketball. We'd be gearing up for the
Yeah.
Masters, and now here we
Oh
are.
yeah.
Have you at least been
Yeah.
able to play golf? Or Louisiana's kind of crazy.
No,
They may have shut you down there.
no. My course where I live, we're not shut down, but I'm not playing. I did that last game in New York at Madison Square Garden when they called the season and sports stopped at halftime of the Creighton St. John's game.
Yeah.
And because I was there, I was extra careful. And with grandchildren, particularly two of them that are so close by that I get to see, if healthy, I felt like, I don't need to be playing golf and putting myself at further risk. And I did, to a certain extent, quarantine myself because of having been in New York. And every year after basketball season ends, after my sort of 7-month tour of 7.5-month tour, I guess, of football and basketball, I usually have a stuffy nose and a stuffy head and maybe some congestion in my chest. And so I take it really slow the first week that I'm home, where I'm not, flying every third day, which is certainly the case in basketball. So, I thought I might be, I thought that there was the potential that I maybe had the virus. So, but it was no different. I didn't feel any different than I would any year in probably the last 5 to 10 years, feeling that way because your body, you go. You're kind of on adrenaline during the month of February. That's sort of the dog days of traveling, especially the weather situations being what they are. So with that in mind, I always take it slow and easy when I get back, but particularly so this year because of what was happening and where I was, as it was finishing, as my season was finishing up. I'm in the epicenter of where the virus ultimately was. But while I was there, it was stationed mostly in Westchester County over by New Rochelle, in that area, and it made it into the city, and the pandemic really took over in the city the week I left. So I thought I needed to be extra careful, and especially because I wanted to see my grandkids, and I've done that. And just this week I held our 3-month-old for the first time in about 6 weeks. So
Wow.
Wow.
I decided that was more. I decided that was more important than even golf, which it is. But to tell you I'm not jonesing for golf would be a lie. So, I am really jonesing for golf. I miss it. I've been walking. I've been taking speed walks every day and going out on the course. A lot of times, I've done a few videos that I put on social media that I've done from the golf course, but I haven't played yet. I hope to possibly do that maybe next week as this thing flattens out and we start seeing some of the cases, slow down a little bit, which I think we're on the precipice of.
Yeah.
Louisiana's gotten hit hard, as you know.
Yeah,
Most
it
of it
has.
is most of it is South Louisiana, which is Orleans and Jefferson parishes, but Caddo in Northwest Louisiana is the third largest city in the state, and we're overflowing at our hospitals. And one of my sons-in-laws would be he works in administration at the LSU Medical Center, the Ochsner Health Center, and he's aware of a lot of what's going on. He's working out of his home now, but they're full. I mean, they are absolutely jam-packed full there. So Caddo Parish has got its fair share where I live as well. My other son-in-law is a first-year resident at UMC in Jackson, Mississippi. So they're dealing with it in a big way there as well. So I'm acutely aware of what's going on and a lot of things that maybe aren't being reported that certain people in the medical industry know about. And it's still, as much as you think you're hearing, and maybe there's an overabundance of it, trust me when I tell you, there's still more out there that the masses don't know about.
Yeah, that's the scary part. And we're all just kind of sitting here and playing the waiting game. And that's what we're going to continue to do. Obviously, Tim, when we have you on, we're breaking down various sports related endeavors. We had you on last in November, breaking down the SEC championship game. It seems like a long time ago that we did that. So on this edition of the podcast, we thought maybe we could just send some rapid fire questions your way, kind of have fun with it, and provide a nice welcome distraction. So we're just going to throw some at you here and give us whatever comes to mind. And my first one is, have you delved into any new Netflix or television shows since the pandemic has hit?
Yes. I got the third season of Ozark out of the way.
Yes.
Good one.
I do really like Ozark a lot. I think Jason Bateman is incredible in it, and the actors are all really good, but he directs as well as plays the lead, which is impressive to me. So we watched that, and I was late to the game on Homeland. I never watched it, and that show started back in 2011.
Yeah,
and my wife and I never watched it, so I wanted something to be like Ozark that we could watch. And there are a couple of other ones that are out there, but they haven't dropped as many episodes. And Homeland is, that's 90 episodes. So we binged in the last 4 days. And just 4 days, we worked our way through season 3, episode 9. So we're going to start episode 10 of season 3 of Homeland tonight. So we've been on that as well. And I'll tell you something else I've done because I'm just a romantic about sports. Last night, one of my son-in-laws called me and said, Gowdy is on the baseball network on MLB with Harry Carey calling the 68 World Series Game 7. Go to it now. And so I immediately DVR'd Kurt Gowdy and Harry Carey on the 68 series with Mickey Lolich going against Bob Gibson. I remember literally faking sickness in school to go home to watch the NLCS, the ALCS, and the World Series in those days. They played day baseball during the week for World Series games back in those days. And I just was absolutely not going to miss those games. I think, and my parents knew it. I mean, they flat out knew that I was going to play sick at about noon and check out. So that brought back a lot of memories. It was in black and white. They didn't have and we had color TV back then, so I watched it live in color. But for whatever reason, MLB broadcasted it last night in black and white, which made it look older than it really, is. But it also it was like watching, a movie that they purposely shoot in black and white for dramatic effect.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it did.
The book was like the De Niro movie. That comes to mind. The boxing movie that De Niro
Raging
made.
Bull.
Help me out. Raging Bull. It was shot in black and white for a specific purpose, and it was better because of it. Well, I've kind of felt the same way watching that took me to sleep last night after I watched about 6 episodes of Homeland.
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned Ozark, Homeland. I mean, the hot option right now is Tiger King. So is that on your watch list?
Oh, yeah, we watched that.
Yep.
Yeah, we watched that. And I watched it more to just get it out of the way. Our kids were like, our daughters and they're the ones that keep us up to date with pop culture. This is so nuts. You've got to see it. It's like watching a train wreck over and over and over and over again, but you still want to watch it. You still want to be able to say you watched it. When you get to my age and you watch that kind of drivel, it's funny, but it's sad. It's like sickeningly funny. And we got some entertainment value out of it for a little bit, but that's one of those hot topic conversations, I think, for the last, month, 3 weeks to a month.
Yeah.
I think in 2 or 3 years, even people in their 30s will look back and go, God almighty, did we waste a lot of time watching that garbage?
Not just watching it, but talking about it and going crazy over it. But hey, you're staying in the loop with pop culture, so it can't be too bad of a thing.
You got to, if you're going to do what I do for a living,
yep.
you got to do that.
And I mean, we've got March Madness here that we've missed out on, opening day in baseball, the Masters in golf. So what's the televised sport that you've missed the most during this time?
Well, I mean, baseball, I think. I miss golf tremendously, both playing it and watching it. But, not having an opening day, I think was the first time. It was one thing to lose the tournament, and we all knew why we were losing the tournament. There was, from a life point of view and a business point of view, you could understand how we could dispose of the NCAA tournament and why it needed to be disposed of given the pandemic. But I go back to the romance factor with baseball. Even though opening day has kind of been screwed up in recent years, in the old days, opening day was always a day game in Cincinnati, maybe generally a day game in St. Louis as well. I think that for a lot of us, knowing that there was no opening day and that the prospects for there being one was very much in jeopardy, was a great reminder of the situation that we find ourselves in. I was shocked to see both tennis and the Open Championship say no to playing in the future. That went away. I was like, oh my. I think now we're just in a situation where, especially with all of the speculation that's out there regarding football, and specifically for you guys and for me too, college football, once we see some sporting activity come back to light, whether it's baseball, I don't think this whole Arizona only thing is going to work out, but at least they're talking about something. As soon as we see some sports come back to light, I think we'll begin to feel more comfortable about the fact that football in some form will be played, both at the collegiate as well as the pro level.
Well, us, we're always itching for college football. So that leads into my next question. Of course, as Mizzou fans, we cover the Tigers. We just had to endure watching the 97 Missouri-Nebraska game on ESPNU. So you watch the 68 World Series. That's what I've been watching. But my college football question for you is, which offense was more dominant, 2019 LSU or 95 Nebraska?
2019 LSU. And the reason is because of the explosive nature of the offense. Nebraska was dominant. And, it's interesting because so many of the triple option philosophies that are in vogue with what Nebraska was doing through that period from a run game standpoint, a lot of the single wing stuff that they did is also a part of the passing game that the LSU Tigers adopted, which came basically from Sean Payton's offense with the Saints, one that I was fortunate enough to see from its first year calling Saints preseason games in 2006. And by the way, since we were just talking about viewing habits earlier, so far, I think the two brightest lights of replays of historic events in sports, number one, the 82 Final Four game between North Carolina and Georgetown, the Freddie Brown bad pass game. I was on hand for that. I was 26 years old. I'll never forget being in the Superdome, covering that as a Cub reporter in New Orleans at that particular time. It was the second consecutive Final Four I'd been to, and I'm on a run now of, do the math. I've only missed two Final Fours since then. 88 at Kansas City at Kemper with Danny and the Miracles, and I missed 96 when Kentucky won it in East Rutherford, New Jersey.
Against Syracuse.
Every other one every other one I've made until
like
this
38 years.
Yeah, I mean, I've only missed two until this year when nobody got to see one. So that was one that jumps out for me. And the other one, man, and this is purely from a tribal circumstance, but I think also it resonated around the country to some extent. I was doing Saints preseason games from 2000 till 2012, so 12 years. I was doing the games when Katrina hit, left a Ravens game in New Orleans on a Thursday. The eye of the hurricane hit about 26 hours later, but the concrete slab going across Lake Pontchartrain was bumper to bumper the next day at noon. I decided to drive home to Shreveport, which is about a 4.5 to 5 hour drive. And I drove home after that game, got home at about 5 a.m. And I woke up at about noon, turned on the news, Fox News or CNN, one, I'm not sure which, but you could see what was going on. It was like, oh my God. Okay. And did the preseason game in Oakland when the second storm that was going to the southwestern part of the state hit again. And we had more flooding from more levees that were breached the second go round. And I was with the team in Oakland, and we were all in the lobby of the hotel watching, New Orleans go under again. It was like, Katrina lasted longer because there was another hurricane that came about a week to 10 days later. That may have been Rita, if memory serves me correctly.
I think so, yeah.
So that was devastating, but I was part of that, and that was before Sean got there, obviously. And then he comes back, and that game that ESPN replayed Monday night with Atlanta, I was there, and I made sure that I didn't miss that game. I was doing a radio show for Sporting News at that time, and my show I did out of my house here at the Chateau, and I took my little buddy Rogers Hampton with me. We drove down, got to the game early. We had passes to go on the field. Saw a bunch of my friends from ESPN and a lot of other networks that were there. Green Day and U2 played both pregame and halftime. Irma Thomas did the national anthem, a New Orleans icon. And, you just knew that whoever was playing the Saints that night was in trouble. And at that time, Michael Vick was in his prime. But for them to replay that, it reminded us all, I think, of how sports can heal. And New Orleans was really hurting. The entire Gulf South region was hurting. And that game, and I've even talked to Drew about it. I've talked to Sean Payton about it. I don't think there's any question that even the Super Bowl, okay, there is a healthy debate about which game was more important, whether it was the Super Bowl championship win or that game in 2006 when the Superdome came back. It was open for business.
Steve
because
Gleason,
a lot
the
of
block
people thought
punt.
it may never be. A lot of people thought it would never come back. Tom Benson, as an owner, had fallen into disfavor. There was talk of them moving the team to San Antonio. A lot of fans turned on him. There was a complete reclamation project, not only of an entire region of the country, but I think for Benson as an owner and the way he and Paul Tagliabue were able to bring New Orleans back through the Superdome and that reopening that night, that's what sports is all about. And when the game ended, Rogers, my buddy who produced my show, he and I are going out to our car. We were trying to beat traffic, but we weren't going to. But we just sat in our car for maybe 2.5 hours on Poynter Street. Love it. We rolled our windows down, just watching all these people come out from all ethnic backgrounds, black, white, Jew, Gentile, you name it, from different socioeconomic backgrounds, all walking out of that dome, all with one feeling, the pure joy of sports coming back and the Saints being back and the Superdome being open, and I was so glad ESPN decided to rebroadcast that, because I thought it was something our country needed to see now, not just sports fans, but people in general. Whenever we do get sports back, and I'm not sure when, I'm not a doctor, don't play one on TV, but I do know this, when it does come back, it will be the healing process that it's always been, which is what's the essence of sport. I mean, it's why I'm in this business. And I'm not going to deny the fact that I'm a native Louisianian and I was calling Saints games in the preseason and had grown up a Saints fan that it didn't matter more, because it did.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. We can't wait for it to come back and start that healing process with sports. But my next question, best new coaching hire in the SEC, Eli Drinkwitz, Lane Kiffin, Sam Pittman, or Mike Leach, who's already kind of stuck his foot in his mouth? That's to be expected, maybe just not this soon.
Well, it's a tie. It's a Mississippi tie for me.
Yeah.
I think both Mike Leach and Lane Kiffin are going to infuse tremendous energy into what is already the most competitive division in college football. Look, Mike this was probably a great learning aspect of his early tenure in the SEC. I frankly was shocked that they decided to hire him, because I never thought an SEC school would, because of the nature of his persona. And not just his political views, which are strong and maybe run in some people's minds contrary to those in that particular region of the country, but because he's just that unique and that eccentric. Fans in general in the South, the eccentricities are not always something that would be valued in the Delta region of our country. And to some extent, I think that's what Mike just found out. He could pretty much say and do whatever he wanted in Lubbock, Texas, say and do whatever he wanted to do in Pullman, Washington. But even though Starkville does fit to some extent the Census Bureau's view of a city, of a college town, the part of the country that he's in and the microscope that comes with being in the most powerful conference and division within a conference in America is going to be different. And he found that out. Probably good that he found out now, when football's not being played and there are more pressing issues in the country than what Mike Leach tweeted out. But I think that he'll learn from it and be very, very effective. I know he lost a player or two. That's one of the reasons why it got so much more coverage, at least in our part of the country. But I think he'll learn from it, and I know that he'll be successful because he's been successful everywhere he's been as a head coach and as an assistant coach. Kiffin immediately gets Oxford energized. I have a daughter that went to school there, who's now living in Jackson. Her husband's a resident at UMC and is working feverishly along with several others, first-year residents on CV19. But they're both Ole Miss people, and I know how they feel, and their age bracket fan base feels about the arrival of Kiffin. He is just what the doctor ordered for them off the field, and I think on the field we'll run an offense that's not exactly, but similar to what they have been accustomed to seeing under Hugh Freeze. So I think that both of those are going to be the most impactful without question.
Well, kind of sticking in the SEC, of course, we went back, Tim, and found back in 2016, we had you on our podcast. You actually predicted on that podcast Ed Orgeron would win a national title at LSU. It has happened. Of course, Joe Brady gone, Joe Burrow off to the NFL draft, going to be taken number 1 here by the Bengals, we think. Does Ed Orgeron ever win another national title at LSU?
Oh, I think so. Yeah, I think when you get a guy like Linehan to replace Brady, that should tell you something.
Yeah.
I believe that from an offensive standpoint, I mean, Joe Burrow was a once-in-a-generation talent. I don't know that his story will be equaled in the next 15 to 20 years. I mean, I really don't. What he was able to accomplish as a transfer. Miles Brennan is, I think, a guy they have a great deal of faith and confidence in. Steve Ensminger is very high on him. Physically, he has a lot of the same requisite tools that Burrow has. The question will be, can he lead both on the field and off the way Burrow did? The pieces around him are all there. I think the expectations are going to diminish somewhat because it's still Alabama's narrative. Listen, LSU is the king of college football right now, but they aren't the dominant program of the conference or of their division. Alabama is and remains, and they're going to be ranked ahead of LSU going in. And Probably Georgia will get more run than LSU does as well this season. So that will serve them, I think, well, to make them aware that there are enough people out there questioning them and saying, well, you were a one-hit wonder. Burrow was to you what Manziel was to A&M. We saw what happened to that program when Johnny Football left. That kind of conversation's out there, and I think that will serve to inspire this LSU team to be more than capable of defending its championship. I think they have a chance, to win all but maybe one or two games. You can fight back from a national championship in 15-0 with, an 11-1 or a 10-2 season, and you win a bowl game. That's holding serve, I think, and we'll see. But in time, with the kind of talent that they're still bringing in, I think there's a very good chance that within the next handful of years, Coach O can win another one.
Well, we definitely look forward to that. And moving over to the NFL side, our Kansas City Chiefs here have won the Super Bowl for the first time in 50 years. Patrick Mahomes led the way. Is he the biggest sports star in America in 2020 and moving forward?
Oh, I don't know if I could go there quite yet. Tom Brady's still in the league, isn't he? Yeah.
I believe so, somewhere, maybe down in Tampa Bay.
Yeah, and this isn't Patrick's fault. It's not anyone's fault, but you guys know this because of the part of the country you're in, and I'm in the South, but in the middle portion of the country, we're part of the flyover states.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, but the East Coast, whether it's New England or New York, the West Coast, whether it's the Rams or the Raiders, those teams are going to get more, or the 49ers even, okay? They're going to get more love than teams in the Midwest and the South. It's that simple. I think the NFC South, by far and away, is the most competitive division in the NFL. And, after I talked to you guys at the end of college football, I had the honor of calling the final pick six thrown for Jameis Winston to hit the 30-30 plateau in the NFL. Matt Millen and I did that game week 17 of the NFL season. And that was obviously the last pass that he would ever throw for Arians at Tampa. You look at the acquisition of Brady to that team, and in a division where, my goodness, Bridgewater goes to Carolina. You got Breeze, who has better numbers than Brady, returning in New Orleans for at least for 1 year, maybe two. And then you see Matty Ice is still in Atlanta. That's the best division in football. So it's the NFC South. What I'm saying to you is there's in the NFL vernacular of what superstardom is. As an individual, Mahomes is it. Yes, he is the quintessential individual player of his generation. No quarterback in the National Football League right now is more feared than Mahomes. So in terms of talent, I'm right there with you. But in terms of attention, okay, he still won't get as much attention as Brady will get, or Breeze will get, or others that have played for a longer period of time and have had staying power. And one of the reasons for that is because of where he's located geographically. Think about it. How many times have we talked about how great the home field is historically in Green Bay, Lambeau Field, Superdome in New Orleans even, okay? And Arrowhead it's not the first one that's ever mentioned, is it? It's not. But I would tell you that for me, after Lambeau Field, it's Arrowhead for me. Now, the Superdome, because it's a dome stadium, it can actually be louder in there because it's a dome stadium. But I just think it's one of those tragedies of the way sports media, much like the news media, works. East Coast, West Coast, middle of the country, always in third.
Well, you're probably right about that. Of course, here in Kansas City, we deal with that on a daily and weekly basis. And you know what? We may be Super Bowl champions for longer than we thought, depending on what happens with football. I think someone said, one of our rivals said, well, that's a very expensive paperweight. And I was like, well, we may hold on to that for 2 years. That's a nice paperweight that we'll have the Lombardi Trophy.
The the Blue Jays did it in baseball, as you know, for a couple of
Right.
years. Man,
Hey,
and the poor Montreal Expos were, they probably had a chance to win a World Series in '94 and never had a chance to find out.
Right. Tim, last thing before we cut you loose here, non-sports related whatsoever, and I don't even know how big of a music fan you are, but I've got to know, what is the best live concert you've ever attended?
Wow. That's an easy one, actually. Electric Light Orchestra, 1976.
Wow.
Hirsch Memorial Coliseum. They had just come out with a new world record. Jeff Lynne, Bev Bevan, and that incredible group of musicians that, you had flying cellos and and violins all over the place. And it was incredible. Maybe it was because I was 20 years old and I was a rock jock while going to school, and I had access to the backstage areas and got to meet Jeff Lynne and Bev Bevan and all the members of Electric Light Orchestra. But if you're my age or older, and people are listening, and if you haven't, he finally got his group together. He lost his tenor, who passed away a few years ago, and all these groups like the Eagles and the Doobie Brothers and so many others, Earth, Wind, and Fire, that continue to Chicago, that continue to do tours and take us back. The ELO had never been back together again. Well, Richard Tandy, who is the keyboard guy that wrote so much of what Jeff Lynne produced, and his stuff sounded very much like the Beatles. John Lennon was a huge role model in Jeff Lynne's life. They decided to hit the road, and they call it Jeff Lynne's Electric Light Orchestra now, because so many in his group are gone. And basically what he's doing is he's getting orchestras like the Boston Pops, a little bit like the Moody Blues did back in the day.
Yes.
Do the concert, have your core group of the band, then you get whatever, the incredible, huge orchestras that are in whatever area you might be. And every major town's got one. And they come out and they do these incredible shows, Hyde Park and all that. And he made a tour this year into the United States for the first time. Check out on YouTube some of their stuff. Imagine being 20 years old and you're seeing a bunch of young guys with long hair that look like the Rolling Stones, and they're throwing their violins and cellos. It's just, and there was a laser light show. And in 1976, a laser light show was, I mean, my God, it was like we were all going into outer space. So that for me will always be my favorite. I love ELO. I was actually on my way to a KISS concert on March 12th, listening to you call that game in the tournament when the world shut down. No KISS concert, no more ACC tournament. Everything went away, and that's when it all happened. So I was on my way to see KISS. So no judgment, right, on that one. Right? It didn't happen though. So as of now, my last concert ever was Aerosmith in Vegas back in February. So if that's the last one, that's not bad either. That's
so
a really good one. I would tell you that the Eagles, every time I saw them, would be
outstanding,
the most enjoyable. Yeah, I mean, you could see the Eagles anytime, and it would be incredible. But just in terms of a show that was impressive, and you came walking out going, "Oh my God!" Not only was the music great, but the show and the pyrotechnics that were involved. You didn't have much of that back then, and ELO was on the cutting edge of all that. Plus they were tremendous musicians. So, and again, I was 20 years old, not, 40 or 50 years old. And I think everything seems bigger when we're younger. And I was, in a position because of being a kid in school, but I was also a rock jock. I had access to these guys. And so I got to meet them at a very early age. And, I've posted a few pictures with them from time to time on my, my social media. So, I'm a big fan of theirs. I got a gold record for and plaque from them for Mr. Blue Sky in 1977. I was one of the music directors in school at the K-Rock Radio when I was working in Shreveport on weekends. I started working during the week as well when I was 21, and I was a guy that one of the first 30 markets to play Mr. Blue Sky, and they sent me a plaque with a gold record in it, which I still have in my study today.
That is awesome. I mean, of course, the Eagles are great. We'll definitely have to go back and check out ELO. But just before we let you go here, I just got to go back and be fair to Jameis Winston, because Tom Brady's last pass as a Patriot was also a pick six. So we just got to be fair here. I'm sure that's all Tom Brady's going to be remembered for.
Yeah. I think it definitely helps to have had a few extra opportunities. I think Jameis will land somewhere and do well. I love his prospects. He just probably needs an address change. Where that address change will be, who knows? But, I still think he has what it takes to be successful with that second act. I think the same is true, by example, for a guy like Marcus Mariota. I think after what happened to Mariota in Tennessee, he just needed an address change. He got hurt. He wasn't physically really at his best. I think once he gets situated where he is, there are chances that he can be from a backup position back to in an opportunity where maybe the expectations aren't as great. He can be highly successful, because I would have never thought that Mariota would have lost his job to Tannehill. But sometimes that happens with injuries in
Sure
the
does.
National
Yep.
Football League.
Absolutely. I tell you what, Tim, we can't thank you enough. It's been so much fun as always. And we were just going to start thinking about getting that trip planned down to do our interview with you for our upcoming film. And then this all happened. So as soon as we're allowed to see humans again, we're going to get that plan with you and come down and get that beautiful backyard of yours in our shot. We're excited to do it. And we're going to make it happen.
You got it. I'd love to have that. I look forward to the day when it does.
It will. One of these days we will pull out of this and we will be talking about sports, and hopefully kind of going back to this as just a mere blip on the radar. But Tim, we thank you so much as always. Stay safe, stay healthy, my friend.
Always an honor.
You bet. All the best, fellas. Take care.
You too.